Hello everyone, it is Wednesday. I'm sitting in the ugly orange chair, time for Bible study. Today, we are wading into, I say wading into because I have no idea how far we get. We are wading into a massive, massive chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, at least insofar as the breadth of stuff that it contains, chapter 5. So if you haven't read it already, or haven't read it recently, stop right now, go read the 5th chapter of Matthew, watch the video, and then join us tonight at 7:30 via Zoom. All the information is in the description to the video, and I'm going to spam it to all of you in ways that you'll be greatly annoyed by. But, so I hope to see you at 7:30. But for right now, I want to draw your attention to a bit of great news from chapter 5 here. Great news for everyone who feels spiritually inadequate. For everyone who wakes up and feels like a fraud. For everyone who looks at their relationship with the Lord, maybe their spiritual disciplines, right? And feels like a failure. For everyone who is a screw up and knows it. And it's right here in verse 3. The first of the Beatitudes, these blessings that Jesus pronounces. Of course, the rest of chapter 5, I said, there's so much here. And I want to hear from you this evening because I want to know what strikes you and what you want to talk about, because there's everything here from the role of the law to the role of the Christian to anger, lust, divorce, oaths, retaliation. It's near infinite. I have no idea how far we'll get. But right now, I want to draw you to this one verse, verse 3, the first of the Beatitudes, where Jesus pronounces, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, you want the kingdom of heaven. I want the kingdom of heaven. So, I want to be poor in spirit, right? But what does that mean? What does that mean? We can tick off a few things that it clearly does not mean. It clearly does not mean material poverty. Now, elsewhere in Scripture, we know that God has a particular care for those who are poor and marginalized, for widows and orphans, right? For those who are oppressed. And consequently, he expects his people to have a particular care for the poor and the oppressed. But that's not necessarily what he's talking about here. We know that because he says theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And we know that simply being poor does not assure a person, does not make a person righteous, and certainly does not ensure a person's salvation. Look, how much money you have really is not a very good predictor of the goodness or badness of your actions. Poor people do horrible things just as often as rich people. The only difference is the poor are far more likely to get caught and pay the penalty than the rich. Power has its privileges. In any case, that's not what he's saying here. We might say, well, he's talking about the consolation of faith. Where he's talking about, oh, well, maybe you're poor, maybe you're having a bad time, but if you have faith, then in the end, the kingdom of heaven is yours. Which is, broadly true, but that's kind of a platitude, isn't it? I mean, that doesn't seem like it means a great deal. At least you've got your faith. I mean, that's not very comforting. Now, they're not just the poor. They are the poor in spirit who are blessed here. So we have to figure out who are the poor in spirit. What is spiritual poverty? Now, I could go on about this, but I'd rather read you just a couple of lines from John Stott. John Stott was an English pastor, passed away a couple of years ago, great writer. And John Stott put it this way. He said, "To be poor in spirit is to acknowledge our spiritual bankruptcy before God. For we are sinners under the holy wrath of God and deserving nothing but his judgment. We have nothing to offer, nothing to plead, nothing with which to buy the favor of heaven. The poor man is one who is both afflicted and unable to save himself, and who therefore looks to God for salvation, while recognizing that he has no claim upon God. This really turns the world's ideas about spirituality on their head. Who does the world admire as spiritual? Well, usually it's people who have done great deeds, right? Or people who speak with great wisdom, or people who appear on TV in gold chairs and with shiny hair. Hey. In any case, what Jesus is saying here is, no, that's not the spiritual elite. And it's not the spiritual elite because this spiritual poverty is only a recognition of reality. The spiritual poverty is a recognition of a reality that affects all human beings. Are you a spiritual screw-up? Yes. Are your prayers adequate? No. Are you as diligent as you should be about attending to the things of God? No, you are not. Nor am I. Nor am I. The trick is, do you know it? Do you own it? Do you fess up to it? Do you recognize genuinely that this is a problem? Do you recognize genuinely your inability to solve this problem? That is spiritual poverty. And the thing about spiritual poverty is spiritual poverty forces us to rely on grace. The knowledge of spiritual poverty forces us to rely on God's grace poured out in Jesus Christ and not on anything in us, because we know our spiritual poverty. Spiritual poverty, knowledge of it, prevents us from falling back on easy excuses like, I'm basically a good person because I know that, I'm a hard mix. I don't know. I got moments, but no matter how good you are, no matter how spiritual you are still in the same boat with the rest of humanity, because Romans 3:23 applies to you as much as it does to everyone. And that is simply the declaration that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And consequently, all are in this state of spiritual poverty, but faith, saving faith, is the knowledge of both your spiritual poverty and where to turn to when you acknowledge it. Consequently, you turn to Jesus Christ as the source, the sole source of your righteousness. I cling to Jesus for everything that I have. When I stand before God, what have I got? I've got one thing. I've got Jesus. And consequently, I'm the richest man in the universe. So, take heart if you feel like you've really blown it. You probably have. If you know it, and you know where to turn, you recognize your spiritual poverty, and you turn to Christ, and to Christ alone, as your only source of righteousness, your only ladder to climb, your only handle to cling to, yours is the kingdom of heaven. I will see you, I hope, at 7:30. In the meantime, stay cool. It's hot out there.